The year was 1875, and the land itself felt betrayed. This was the border of the Arizona and Utah territories, a vast, bleeding canvas of red rock and alkali flats that stretched toward a sky too big and too blue. The wind never stopped. It was a high, lonely sound that carried particles of grit sharp enough to sting the skin, and it whispered of broken treaties. The long walk was over, but its shadow remained. The din, the people, had been marched 300 miles to a place called Bosque Redondo, and those who survived had returned to find their ancestral lands carved up and sold, their sacred canyons fenced in by new masters. Kai Nez sat his horse on the high mesa. Looking down, he was a man made of the same red earth he watched. He had been a scout for the United States Army, the Bluecoats. He had worn their wool, eaten their hardtack, and used his eyes to lead them through canyons that were now forbidden to him. He had taken their silver dollars because starvation was the only other choice offered. The soldiers had called him a good Indian, a civilized tracker. His own people, those scattered remnants he now searched for, had other words for him: traitor, enemy. He was a man balanced on the blade of a knife, belonging nowhere. He belonged neither to the white world that saw him as a useful savage, nor to the Navajo world that saw him as a ghost. He had returned to this unforgiving landscape not for glory, and not for the Americans. He was searching for his younger sister, Ilara. She had been taken during a raid years ago, swallowed by the chaos, and he had heard whispers she was working, perhaps as a servant, perhaps as something worse, at a fort near the settlement of Dry Bluff. Kai's gaze scanned the horizon. His eyes, dark and sharp, missed nothing. He saw the hawk turning lazy circles in the high thermals. He saw the shimmer of heat rising from the canyon floor. And he saw, miles to the west, a plume of dust that did not move like the wind. It was frantic, desperate. Evelyn Hartley did not believe in love. She believed in the solid weight of the Colt revolver on her hip and the power of the stallion, Apollo, between her knees. She was 20 years old, and her father, Arthur Hartley, had raised her. He was a stern, silent Englishman who had come to Arizona with a dream of breeding fine English horses. But the land had baked his heart dry. Evelyn's mother had died when she was 6, succumbing to a fever that burned as hot as the midday sun. Evelyn had grown up in the company of ranch hands, men who smelled of leather, sweat, and tobacco. She could ride before she could properly read, and she could shoot the head off a rattlesnake at 20 paces. Her father valued strength, but he also valued propriety when it suited him. He wanted to secure his land, to build the empire his wife's death had stalled. Evelyn knew what that meant. It meant alliances. It meant marriage. It meant Twung Samuel Dorn, a man from the fort with cold eyes and a wet mouth, who looked at her as if she were a filly to be broken. Evelyn had sworn to herself she would sooner feed herself to the coyotes than belong to any man. Love, as far as she had seen, was just a prettier word for a cage. Today, she had pushed Apollo too hard, too far. She was tracking a small band of mustangs that had lured one of her father's prize mares away from the ranch. The sun was a physical weight, pressing the air from her lungs. She had emptied her canteen an hour ago. The dust Kai had seen was her, and she was not alone. She heard the rumble of hooves on the hardpan too late. 3 riders burst from a dry wash, cutting off her path back to the ranch. They were not soldiers. They were not cowboys. They were shadows. Men whose faces were hidden under layers of grime and beard, their eyes hard and hungry. "That's a fine piece of horse flesh," the leader called out. He was a big man with a belly that spilled over his saddle horn. His teeth were yellow. Evelyn reined Apollo in, the stallion tossing his head nervously. Her hand moved, not to her hat, but to the grip of her colt. "He is," Evelyn said, her voice steady, though her heart hammered. "And he and I are riding home. Step aside." The man laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Feisty. I like 'em feisty. We'll take the horse. Girly. And seeing as you're so far from home, maybe we'll take you too. Keep us warm tonight." The other two men fanned out, creating a half circle. "I am warning you," she said, drawing the revolver. "The next man who moves gets a bullet." The leader stopped laughing. He spurred his horse. Evelyn fired. She was fast, faster than most men. The bullet screamed past the man's head, close enough to clip his ear. He roared in pain and rage. He lunged, grabbing her arm before she could fire again. The force of it nearly pulled her from the saddle. "You little witch!" he bellowed, backhanding her across the face. Pain exploded behind her eyes. Stars burst in the red daylight. She lost her grip on the revolver. It fell, disappearing into the thick dust of the canyon floor. Another man grabbed Apollo's bridle. The stallion reared, but the man held fast. The leader leaned in, his breath a foul wave of whiskey and spoiled meat. He grabbed a handful of her hair, yanking her head back. "That was your last mistake," he snarled. Evelyn fought. She was not a screamer. She was a brawler. She drove her boot heel into the man's shin and clawed at his face, drawing blood. It only made him angrier. He raised his fist to strike her again, to silence her. The first man, the one holding Apollo, made no sound. He simply stiffened, a look of profound surprise on his face. He looked down. A dark, heavy-bladed knife was buried to the hilt in his chest. He slid sideways from his saddle and hit the ground. The leader froze, his fist still raised. He turned, confusion warring with fear. What in the hell? Kainez was there, as if he had risen from the dust itself. He had left his own horse on the ridge and had covered the last 100 yards on foot, his moccasins making no sound. The second bandit fumbled for his rifle, still in its scabbard. He was too slow. Kai had his own revolver out. He did not fire. He moved past the horse and struck the man across the jaw with the heavy steel barrel. The crack of bone was sharp and small in the vast silence. The man crumpled. The leader stared, his mouth open. He let go of Evelyn's hair and clawed for his own pistol. Kai shot him once. The sound of the gunshot echoed off the canyon walls, flat and final. The leader looked down at the dark hole that had appeared in his shirt. He slumped forward, then toppled from his horse, landing in a heap next to his companion. The silence that returned was absolute. It was heavier than the heat, broken only by the panicked breathing of the horses and the harsh, ragged gasps of Evelyn Hartley. Kainez stood motionless, the smoking revolver still in his hand. Evelyn scrambled from Apollo's back. Her cheek was on fire, her vision blurred. Her first instinct was survival. She searched the dust, her fingers frantic, for her lost gun. She found it, gripped the wooden handle, and spun, cocking the hammer and leveling it at the man who stood over the bodies. He was Navajo. She saw it instantly. The high, proud cheekbones, the long black hair tied back with a simple leather thong, the dark, unreadable eyes. He wore battered denim trousers, but a warrior's knife was sheathed at his belt. He was lean, but he radiated a stillness that was more dangerous than the bandit's loud threats. Kai looked at her. He saw the gun she pointed at his chest. He saw the way her hand trembled, not from weakness, but from rage and adrenaline. He saw the blue eyes, bright with defiance, and the red mark on her pale cheek. He had seen her fight. She had not cried out. "I did not need your help," she breathed, the words tasting like ash and blood. Kai's expression was impossible to read. His gaze moved from her face to the pistol she held. "You dropped your gun," he said. His voice was low, rough, like stones dragging across the canyon floor. "I would have gotten it back." He looked at the 3 dead men, then back at her. "Perhaps." He turned away from her, a move of such casual dismissal that it stunned her. He walked to the leader's horse and calmly unhooked the man's canteen. He opened it, smelled the contents, and then poured a little water onto the ground before drinking deeply. He was not a savior. He was an opportunist, a survivor. "Who are you?" Evelyn demanded, keeping the gun aimed at his back. He ignored her. He retrieved his knife from the first man's body, wiping the blade clean on the dead man's shirt before sheathing it. He moved with an economy of motion, wasting nothing. "This is Hartley land," she said, trying to inject authority into her voice. "You are trespassing." Kai finished with the knife and turned to face her. His eyes were not angry. They were not kind. They were empty of everything but a deep, ancient weariness. He looked past her, at the red mesas stained dark by shadow. "This is not Hartley land," he said, his voice quiet, but carrying in the still air. "This is Dinebikeya, my land. You are the one who is trespassing." He said it not as an accusation, but as a simple statement of fact, as one might observe that the sun was hot. Evelyn felt a chill despite the heat. She was alone, miles from home, with 3 corpses and a man who looked at her as if she were nothing more than a tumbleweed, blown in on a careless wind. She lowered the pistol, though she did not uncock it. He looked at her again, and for a moment, the emptiness in his eyes was replaced by something else. It was not attraction. It was not pity. It was a cold spark of recognition. He saw the colt in her hand, the trousers she wore, the blood on her lip. He saw someone who, like him, did not fit. He gave a short, sharp whistle. His own pony, a scrubby Mustang with intelligent eyes, trotted down from the rocks. Kai swung into the saddle, his movements fluid and spare. He looked down at her, a lone, small figure in the vast, hostile landscape. "The buzzards will smell the blood soon," he said. "You should go home, if you know the way." He did not wait for an answer. He did not ask if she was hurt. He simply turned his horse and rode east, disappearing into the shimmering heat haze, toward the forbidden mesas. Evelyn Hartley stood trembling, the heavy gun a dead weight in her hand. She watched him until he was gone. She was not grateful. She was furious, and she was unsettled in a way she had never been before. She had just been saved by a man who looked at her as if he wished the bandits had finished the job. It was not love at first sight. It was suspicion. It was pride, colliding with a force just as stubborn. It was the terrifying, unwelcome pull of the wild. Evelyn rode Apollo back to the ranch at a walk, the stallion's lathered sides heaving. The sun was a bruised purple over the western mesas by the time she reached the long, low adobe house. She did not go to the stables. She slid from the saddle, her body aching, and handed the reins to a young hand named Silas, who looked at the dried blood on her cheek with wide eyes. "Just a scratch. Silas," she said, her voice a dry rasp. "See to Apollo. He needs water." She walked into the main room. Her father, Arthur Hartley, stood by the massive fireplace. Though it held no fire, he was a tall, spare man, his face a map of disappointments. He held a glass of whiskey. He looked up when she entered, his gaze sharp. "You are late," he said. His English accent was still sharp, untouched by the desert. "You look a fright. Did you find the mare?" "No," Evelyn said. She went to the sideboard, poured water from a pitcher into a glass, and drank it in 3 long swallows. "I was attacked. 3 men. Out by the Red Wash." Arthur's head snapped up. His eyes moved over her, checking for damage. "The horse. Is Apollo harmed?" Evelyn stopped, the glass halfway to her mouth. "Apollo is fine. They tried to take him, and me. They killed my mare." "They killed." He set his whiskey down hard. "That was a $1,000 horse. Who were they?" "Scum," Evelyn said, weariness settling over her like dust. "Bandits? Does it matter? They are dead." Arthur stared at her. "You killed 3 men. A Navajo," she said, turning away. "He showed up. He killed them." Her father's face darkened with a different kind of anger. "An Indian, here, on my land. And you let him ride away. You should have shot him where he stood. They are all thieves." "He saved my life," she said, the words feeling strange. "And the horse. He was likely part of the gang, come to claim the spoils." Arthur spat. He picked up his drink. "It does not matter. It is handled. You need to clean yourself. We are going to town." Evelyn frowned. "Town, why?" "There is a social at the Dry Bluff Hotel. The Army is celebrating something. A new supply line, or some such nonsense. General Dorn will be there. He is expecting us." Evelyn felt the cold dread that had been sitting in her stomach since the canyon suddenly sharpen. "He is expecting us, or he is expecting me." Arthur Hartley looked at his daughter. He saw the strength in her jaw, the defiance in her eyes. He had cultivated it, been proud of it. Now, it was an inconvenience. "Both," he said. "Evelyn, this ranch is dying. You know it. The drought has killed the grass, and the army pays half what they used to for mounts. We cannot hold on past winter. So we sell. We move on." "Sell what?" he snapped. "The land. It is worthless without water, and Samuel Dorn holds the deed to the aquifer. Every well we have will be dry by Christmas." She stood very still. "Dorn. He is a reasonable man," Arthur said, looking into his whiskey. "He admires this family. He admires you. He has made a very generous proposal, one that secures our future, one that secures the Hartley name." The pieces clicked into place. Hard and ugly. The social, the general, the aquifer. "A proposal," she repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. "You are selling me, just like you would sell a horse." "I am saving this family," he roared, slamming the glass down. "You are my daughter. You will do your duty. You will put on the blue dress your mother wore, and you will smile, and you will accept General Dorn's offer of marriage. This is not a request. Evelyn, it is a matter of survival." "Survival?" she whispered. She felt the bile rise in her throat. She thought of Dorn's cold eyes, the way he looked at her. She thought of the bandit in the desert. His fist raised, she saw no difference. "You call this survival. I call it a cage." "Grow up," her father said, turning his back on her. "The world is not about what you want. It is about what you can hold. We will hold this land. Be ready to leave in 1 hour." 2 days later, Kainez watched the town of Dry Bluff from a low ridge. The town was a scar of raw lumber and dirty canvas, huddled against the wall of a canyon. At the far end, dominating the landscape, was the army fort. It was not a fortress, just a collection of barracks and stables surrounded by a low stone wall. He had not forgotten the girl from the White Ranch. He had seen the way she handled her gun, the fury in her eyes. She was a coyote cub, all teeth and snarls, dangerous because she was cornered, but she was not his concern. His sister was. He had tracked the whispers for months. Alara, taken by soldiers after a skirmish near Fort Defiance. She was alive. She was here, a laundress, or a kitchen girl, working for her keep. A prisoner, no matter what they called it. He needed to get inside, but the fort was alert. He was a known face, a scout who had quit the army's employ. They would not welcome him. They would question him, and if he had no good answers, they would arrest him. But tonight, the town was alive. Wagons were rolling in. Fiddle music, thin and reedy, drifted on the wind. Soldiers were already stumbling out of the saloon, drunk and loud. The town was having a party, a distraction. He waited for the sun to die completely, for the last light to drain from the sky, leaving only a dark purple wound in the west. Then he slipped down from the ridge, a shadow moving toward the lights. He would not go near the fort, not yet. He would use the chaos. He would check the alleyways, the back doors of the kitchens, the laundry sheds behind the fort proper. He would find someone who had seen her. He would find Alara. Evelyn felt like a trussed hen. The dress was powder blue silk, tight in the waist, suffocating her. Her hair was pinned up, heavy and hot on her neck. She stood in the corner of the hotel's main room, which served as a ballroom, a saloon, and a courtroom, depending on the day. Tonight, it smelled of stale beer, cheap perfume, and sweating bodies. General Samuel Dorn was at her elbow. He was a man of 40, meticulously clean. His uniform was pressed, his boots gleamed, and his blonde hair was carefully combed. He did not look like a man who belonged in the desert. He looked like a man who intended to conquer it. "You are a vision, my dear Evelyn," he said, his voice smooth. He placed his hand on the small of her back. His fingers were cold. even in the stifling heat. Evelyn fought the urge to flinch away. She smiled, a brittle thing that felt like breaking glass. "You are too kind, General." "Samuel, please," he urged. "We are to be family, after all." He guided her toward the center of the room, where her father was speaking with a cluster of other ranchers. "Your father and I have come to a wonderful arrangement," Dorn continued, his thumb rubbing small circles on her back through the silk. "An alliance of the two strongest names in this territory, Hartley and Dorn. It has a fine ring. Gasoline, that is what his touch reminded her of. Clean, cold, and flammable." "Father," she said, pulling away from Dorn's grip under the guise of greeting her father. "The heat is... I need a moment of air." Her father's eyes were granite. "Do not be long." Dorn smiled. "Of course, my dear, do not stray. This town is full of rough men. I can handle myself, General," she said. She did not wait for his reply. She slipped through the crowd, past the bar, and pushed open the heavy back door. The alleyway was a blessing. It was dark, cool, and smelled of horses and dust, a relief from the perfume. The fiddle music was muffled, a distant whine. She leaned against the rough wooden wall of the saloon, closing her eyes, pulling in a deep breath of the night air. She was a fool. She had no plan. She was trapped. A small sound made her eyes fly open. A boot scraping on gravel. She was not alone. Across the alley, deep in the shadows cast by a water trough, a figure was crouched. He was watching the soldiers' barracks at the edge of the fort compound, his attention absolute. Evelyn's hand went to her hip, but the Colt was not there. It was in her saddlebag, deemed unladylike for the evening. She cursed her stupidity. The man turned his head. He had heard her. He rose from the shadows, not quickly, but with a deliberate, fluid grace. He stepped into a patch of moonlight spilling from the doorway. It was him. The Navajo from the canyon. Kai froze. He had not expected this. He had been watching, waiting, cataloging the patrols. The last person he expected to see was the woman from the White Ranch, looking like a painted doll. "You," Evelyn breathed, her voice a mix of shock and anger. "The woman from the White Ranch," Kai replied, his voice flat. His eyes swept over her. The fine dress, the panicked look. "You look different. What are you doing here?" she demanded, taking a step back. "Are you here to steal horses?" Kai gave a short, mirthless huff of air. "No. Are you here to buy men?" The question struck her like a slap. Sharper than the bandits. He knew. He had seen her with Dorn. He understood the transaction. She recoiled, stung. "You know nothing of honor. I know what I see," Kai said, his voice low and intense. He took a step closer. She could smell the smoke from his fire and the clean scent of sage. "I see a general buying a bride. I see a father selling a daughter. Your people call this power. My people call it slavery. I am not his slave," she hissed. I am running." "Running where?" he said. "In a blue dress, freedom is not running from a party, little coyote. Freedom is standing still on your own land and telling the world to go to hell. You know nothing about me. I know you shoot at the men who save you." Before she could answer, the sound of heavy boots and low, rough laughter echoed from the end of the alley. "I told you I saw one of them." A voice slurred. "Taking the general's own horses." 3 men stumbled into the alley, cutting off the path to the main street. They were not soldiers. They were rough, hard-bitten civilians, their eyes greedy. Horse thieves. They stopped when they saw Eve and Kai. "Well, looky here," the leader said. "We came for the horses, but we found the prize, the general's little pet." He leered at Eve, then his eyes fell on Kai. "And who is this her watchdog?" Kai moved. He did not hesitate. He placed himself between Eve and the men. "Go back inside the saloon," he ordered her, his voice low. "I am not—" "Go." The men advanced. "Hand over the girl." "Indian," the leader said. "And we might let you live." One of the thieves, a wiry man with a long scar, squinted at Kai in the moonlight. "Wait a minute. I know you. You're Nez, the scout. You were supposed to be scouting for us up on the Cimarron." Evelyn's blood ran cold. "Nez, you were supposed to be scouting for us. He was one of them. A thief, a traitor, the man in the canyon, the bandits. It had all been a trick, a performance." Kai ignored the man. He was focused on the leader, who was pulling a large knife from his belt. The fight was brutal and fast. Kai did not have his gun. He had his knife. The first man lunged. Kai sidestepped, grabbed the man's wrist, and used his momentum to throw him face first into the horse trough. The second man, the one who had recognized him, pulled a pistol. Kai moved inside the man's reach, striking him in the throat with the heel of his hand. The man gagged, dropping the gun, and Kai disarmed him with a vicious chop to the wrist. The leader swung his knife in a wide, clumsy arc. Kai ducked under it, close to the man's body, and drove his own knife up under the man's ribs. The man gasped, his eyes wide with surprise, and collapsed. The whole thing took less than 10 seconds. Kai stood breathing heavily, the bloody knife in his hand. The second man was gagging on the ground. The first was pulling himself, sputtering, from the trough. Kai turned to look at Evelyn. He had saved her. Again. And he was a bandit. He had worked with these men. He had probably killed the men in the canyon to keep her for himself. He took a step toward her. "Stay back," she screamed. She was no longer wearing the colt, but her father had insisted she carry something. She reached into the folds of her silk dress and pulled out a small, pearl-handled derringer, a lady's gun. "Stay where you are," she yelled, her hands trembling as she aimed it at his chest. Kai stopped. He looked at the tiny, foolish gun. He looked at her terrified, furious face. The betrayal in his own expression was absolute. "I am not. Liar," she shrieked. "He knew you. You're a thief. Put the gun down, woman." "No." He took another step, his hand outstretched, not to hurt her, but to take the gun. She pulled the trigger. The explosion was shockingly loud in the narrow alley. The bullet, small as it was, tore through the cloth of his shirt, grazing his upper arm. Kai froze. He looked down at his arm, where blood was already blooming, dark in the moonlight. He looked back at her, his face a mask of stone. The back door of the saloon burst open. Gunshot in the alley soldiers, led by General Dorn himself, poured into the narrow space. They stopped, taking in the scene. The generals intended. Evelyn Hartley, holding a smoking pistol, a dead man at her feet. 2 others, groaning, and a Navajo warrior. "Bleeding." "Evelyn," Dorn shouted, his face purple with rage. "What is the meaning of this?" Evelyn looked at the soldiers. She looked at Kai, who was clutching his arm, and she saw the truth. The soldiers would not ask questions. They would see an Indian, a dead white man, and a wounded arm. They would hang Kai before sunrise, and she would be the hysterical woman he had attacked. She would be ruined, but she would be Dorn's property forever. Kai looked at the soldiers, then at her. He knew he was trapped. Evelyn made her choice. It was not a choice for him. It was a choice for herself. She grabbed his good arm, the one that was not bleeding. "He saved me," she yelled at Dorn. "A wild, desperate lie. They attacked me. He saved me. They shot him." She did not wait for them to understand. She yanked Kai toward the end of the alley. "My horse is here." Kai was stunned, but he reacted instantly. The soldiers were shouting, raising their rifles. "Halt, halt! In the name of the army!" Still, Evelyn reached Apollo, who was hitched to a rail. Kai's pony was just yards away. "Get on!" she screamed at him. He swung onto his pony, his arms screaming in protest. Evelyn scrambled into her saddle, hiking the absurd silk dress up to her knees. "Evelyn," Dorn roared. "You will not. That is an order." A shot rang out, whistling past her head. Evelyn dug her heels into Apollo's sides. The great stallion leaped forward. Kai was right beside her. They thundered out of the alley, past the barracks, and scattered a group of startled soldiers by the main gate. They rode past the edge of town and did not look back. They rode north, leaving the lights and the music behind. They rode into the vast, empty darkness of the desert, bound together by a gunshot and a lie. They rode for 2 hours, guided by a moon that was a sliver of bone in a black sky. Evelyn Hartley had no idea where they were. She only knew they were riding north, deeper into the canyons, away from anything she recognized as home. The torn silk of her dress whipped around her legs, a cold, useless flag. Her hands, scraped raw from the alley fight, were numb on Apollo's reins. The man beside her rode in a heavy silence, his body slumped forward. Kynez, she kept glancing at him, her heart a cold knot of terror and confusion. He had been shot. She had shot him, and then she had saved him. Or had she saved herself? The logic of it was a tangled mess. She was a fugitive. Her father's daughter, the heiress to the Hartley ranch, was gone. In her place was this creature, riding a stolen horse in a ruined dress, next to a bleeding Navajo. Kai pulled his pony to a sudden halt. "What is it?" she whispered. "Reining in Apollo. The wind," he said. His voice was strained, tight with pain. "It is changing. Listen." She listened. At first, she heard nothing but the pounding of her own blood. Then she heard it, a low, rising moan from the east. It was not the high, lonely whisper of the mesas. This was a growl. "A storm," she said, her stomach tightening. "A sandstorm," he corrected. "A bad one. We must find shelter, now." He urged his horse forward, not at a gallop, but at a steady, ground-eating trot. He seemed to know exactly where he was going, even in the starless dark. Evelyn followed. The stallion sensing the urgency, the growl of the wind became a roar. The first grains of sand, sharp as needles, struck her face. Within 10 minutes, the world vanished. The air became a thick, churning wall of red dust. She could not see Kai, though he was only feet ahead of her. She could not see her own hands on the reins. The wind shrieked, a living thing trying to tear her from the saddle. "Here!" a voice shouted. Close by, a hand, strong and hard, grabbed Apollo's bridle. She saw Kai's shape, a darker shadow in the red gloom. He was off his horse, pulling them toward a sheer rock face. "Dismount!" he yelled over the storm. She practically fell from the saddle, her legs weak. He shoved her forward, into a narrow split in the rock. It was a cave, or perhaps just a deep overhang, barely tall enough for a man to stand. He pushed the horses in behind them, their bodies creating a warm, nervous barrier against the opening. The storm outside was apocalyptic. It sounded as if the mountains were being ground to dust. Inside, the darkness was absolute. Evelyn slid down the rock wall until she was sitting on the sandy floor, her body trembling. The immediate danger was past, but a new one was present. She was trapped in the dark with a man she had shot. She heard him move, a heavy sound, and then a long, shuddering sigh that ended in a grunt of pain. "Are you—" she began, and stopped. "I am breathing," he replied, his voice tight. She heard the scrape of flint and steel, a spark, then another. He had a small bundle of dry tinder in his saddlebag. He managed to light a single, short candle, the kind used in mines. The small flame pushed back the darkness. Kai was leaning against the far wall, his eyes closed. His face, caked with dust, was pale beneath his copper skin. His left arm was dark with blood from shoulder to elbow. The sleeve of his shirt was soaked. "You are bleeding badly," she said, stating the obvious. "Your aim was true," he said, not opening his eyes. "I told you to stay back," she whispered, her voice shaking. "You did." He tried to shift, and a sharp, involuntary gasp escaped him. He wore his pain like he wore his skin, a thing he was born to and could not remove. The silence stretched, broken only by the screaming wind. Evelyn looked at the man, at the blood, at the cramped space. She was a Hartley. Hartleys did not panic. They acted. "You must take off the shirt," she said. His eyes snapped open. They were dark and hot with fever. "No, do not be a fool," she said, her fear giving way to a cold, practical anger. "I will not let you bleed to death. I shot you. I will tend to it. Now take off the shirt." "I do not need your help," he grated, his pride a raw, exposed nerve. "You needed my help in the alley when you were facing the soldiers," she retorted. "And I need you alive. They will be hunting us. They will call me a murderer if you die." His gaze was sharp, analytical. He saw the truth in her selfish logic. It was a logic he understood. Slowly, wincing, he reached across his body with his good arm and began to unbutton the coarse cotton shirt. He could not do it one-handed. He fumbled, his fingers stiff. "Stop!" she commanded. She knelt in front of him. The space was so small, her knees almost touched his. "I will do it." He did not protest. He sat rigid as she undid the buttons, her fingers brushing his skin. The heat coming from him was intense. When the shirt was open, she pulled the bloody cloth away from his left arm. The bullet had torn a shallow gutter of flesh along the outside of his shoulder. It was not deep, but it was long, and it was bleeding steadily. "It grazed the bone, I think," she said, her voice clinical. "It is not a fatal wound, but it must be cleaned." "I have whiskey," he said, nodding to his saddlebag. She retrieved a small flask. She also found a clean rag. "This will sting. Just do it." She poured the whiskey over the wound. Kai's entire body went taut as a bowstring. His jaw muscles locked, and a low hiss escaped his teeth. But he made no other sound. "Now the shirt," she said. "All the way off. I need to bandage it." He gave a sharp, negative shake of his head. "The rag is enough. The rag is filthy, and it is not large enough." She snapped. "This is not a debate. Take it off." He looked at her, his eyes burning with a strange, defiant fire. But the fever and the blood loss were making him weak, with a final, pained effort. He shrugged his good shoulder, pulling the shirt off his wounded arm first, then slipping it free. He let it drop to the cave floor. He sat bare-chested in the candlelight, and Evelyn forgot to breathe. She saw his back. It was not the smooth, copper skin she had expected. It was a ruin, a landscape of old, pale scars, laid across his shoulders and spine in a brutal lattice. They were not battle scars. They were not the marks of arrows or knives. They were the methodical, parallel lines of a whip. She stared, unable to speak. The flickering light gave the scars a terrible, living texture. "Give me the bandage," he said, his voice rough. He had turned his face away, as if to hide his shame. Evelyn looked down at her own dress, the powder blue silk, the symbol of her own captivity. She did not think. She grabbed the hem of the expensive skirt, pulled her small knife from the sheath inside her riding boot, and sliced upward. She cut a long, wide strip of silk from the garment. When she looked back at him, he was watching her, his expression unreadable. "You have ruined your dress," he observed. "It was already ruined," she said, her voice hollow. She folded the silk into a thick pad. Her hand, when she touched the new wound on his arm, was trembling. It was not the tremor of fear, or of the cold. It was the shaking of a person who has just looked into a darkness they did not know existed. She pressed the pad to the wound. He flinched. "Hold it there," she ordered, her voice softer now. She cut another long strip of silk and began to wrap it around his shoulder and chest, binding the bandage in place. They were close, so close. She could feel the furnace heat of his skin. She could smell the whiskey on the wound, and beneath it, the scent of dust and sage. Her fingers moved over his ribs, across his back, securing the knot. He sat perfectly still, like a trapped hawk, watching her. "Who did that to you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He did not answer. The wind howled outside, a counterpoint to the suffocating silence in the cave. "It was not bandits," she said, tying the knot. "It was not Indians. That is a white man's work." Kai's gaze dropped to the sandy floor. "They called it discipline," he said. "Who?" The soldiers, the bluecoats, at Bosque Redondo. The name meant little to her. It was just a place, a fort, somewhere in New Mexico. The Long Walk, she whispered, remembering the phrase she had heard her father and his ranch hands use, a phrase spoken with contempt, or indifference. You were a prisoner, she stated. It was not a question. We were all prisoners, he said. My people, the Dine, they marched us 300 miles. They said it was a new home. It was a prison. Evelyn sat back on her heels, the ruined dress pooling around her. The man she had shot, the man she had accused of being a common thief, was a survivor of something she could not comprehend. But you were a scout for them, she said, trying to make the pieces fit. That man in the alley, he knew you. He said you were scouting for the army. I was, Kai said. The anger was gone from his voice, replaced by a deep, cold weariness. Years before, I was a boy. I thought if I helped them, they would leave my family alone. I thought I was buying safety. He laughed, a dry, bitter sound. They used my eyes to hunt my own people, and then they put me in chains with the rest. And the men in the canyon, they were thieves, nothing more. They saw your horse. I saw them. And the men in the alley, more thieves. They were stealing army horses. That one, the one who knew me. He was a mule skinner I knew at Fort Defiance. He thought I was there for the same reason he was. But you were not, she said. No. Then why were you there at the fort? Kai looked at her, his eyes searching her face, as if deciding. The shared danger, the forced intimacy of the cave, had stripped away the polite lies of the world. I am looking for my sister, he said. Her name is Alara. She was taken by soldiers 2 years ago. I heard she's at the fort, working in the laundry. I was watching, waiting for a chance to see her. Evelyn pictured it. The man she had thought was a predator was there on a desperate, hopeless rescue, and she had ruined it. Then I came out, she said. Then you came out? He agreed. A new wave of shame, hot and sharp, washed over her. You saved me, twice, and I shot you. You thought I was a thief, he said. I did not think, she snapped, her anger turning on herself. I saw you, and I saw them, and I was afraid. It is the way of your people, he said, not unkindly. You are taught to be afraid of us. You see an Indian. You see a savage. You do not see a man looking for his sister. She had no answer for that. The story came out of her, ragged and bitter. The ranch, the drought, her father's desperation, the cold, wet-mouthed general who held the rights to their water. He was selling me, she said, her voice raw. That man, Dorn, he was my father's solution. He wanted an alliance. He wanted a wife to civilize this land. I was to be his broodmare. You called it slavery. You were right. Kai listened, his face impassive. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. So we are the same, he said finally. How? We are both running from the bluecoats, he said. You from the general, me from his ghosts. He looked at the scars on his arms. And we are both betrayed. You by your father, me by the nation I served. Evelyn looked at this man, this warrior. He was nothing she had ever known. He was not one of her father's rough, simple ranch hands. He was not a civilized, cruel soldier like Dorn. He was something else, something harder, something more real. My old life is gone, she said, the realization settling on her like a shroud. When I rode out of that town with you, I cannot go back, ever. No, he agreed. They will be hunting us, General Dorn. He is not a man who forgives. He will see this as an insult to his honor. He will send soldiers. He will, Kai said. He will say you kidnapped me. He will say you murdered those men in the alley. I did kill the man. It does not matter, she said. They will hang you, and they will. They will rescue me, and my life will be worse than death. The candle flame gutters, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls of the cave. The storm outside seemed to be lessening, its roar fading to a dull moan. A bond had been forged between them in the darkness. It was not friendship. It was not love. It was the desperate, unbreakable bond of two people who had nothing left to lose, and only each other to trust for survival. They sat in silence for hours, waiting for the dawn. The world outside the cave was eerily quiet. The storm had passed. The air was washed clean, and the morning sun was just beginning to touch the high cliffs with gold. Kai rose stiffly, his face drawn with pain, but his eyes were clear. He walked to the mouth of the cave and looked out at the transformed landscape. Evelyn stood beside him, pulling the tattered remnants of her silk dress around her. "The horses are rested," he said. "We must go. They will follow our trail as soon as the light is full." "Where do we go?" she asked. Kai looked north, toward the jagged, blood-red line of the distant mountains. "To the high country, to my people. It is the only place Dorn's men will not follow easily." He turned to her, his gaze intense. "But you must choose. You come with me. You are an outcast forever. You are one of us, an enemy of your own." Evelyn looked back in the direction of Dry Bluff. She thought of her father, of General Dorn. Then she looked at the man beside her, at the proud, scarred warrior who had spoken the truth. "I am already an enemy," she said. As she spoke, she heard it, faint, thin, and terrible. The sound of a military bugle, carrying on the clear morning air. Dorn was not just sending a posse, he was sending the cavalry. "We must ride," Kai said. He was already moving toward the horses. They did not stop. The sound of the bugle was a brand on their backs, pushing them onward. They rode for 2 days, pushing the horses to the edge of endurance. Kai led her through a maze of canyons so narrow they had to ride in single file, the red rock walls rising 1,000 feet on either side, shutting out the sun. He was a master of the land. He took them over ridges of bare, slick rock that would leave no print, and down dry riverbeds where their tracks would be washed away by the next rain. Though the sky remained a hard, cloudless blue, Evelyn's body was a single, unified ache. The ruined silk dress, so ridiculous in this landscape, was in tatters. She had torn more strips from it to rebandage Kai's arm, which was hot with infection. He rode in a grim, fevered silence, but he did not slow. On the 3rd morning, he stopped, holding up his hand. "What is it?" she asked, her voice a dry crackle. "We are here," he said. She looked around. All she saw was a sheer cliff face, a dead end in the box canyon. Kai dismounted, his movement stiff. He walked to a dense thicket of juniper and scrub oak growing against the rock. He pulled the branches aside, revealing a path, a crack in the world, barely wide enough for a horse. "Come," he said, "quickly." She followed him into the darkness. The path twisted upward for 100 yards, then opened out into a high, hidden valley. It was a sanctuary. A small stream, fed by a spring, ran through the center, nourishing a patch of green grass and a few gnarled cottonwood trees. Perhaps 20 hogans, the traditional Navajo dwellings of mud and timber, were scattered in the canyon's shadow. Thin plumes of smoke rose from their centers. A few sheep and goats grazed on the slopes, watched by a young boy who stood and stared as they approached. Women grinding corn at the stream's edge looked up, their faces hardening. Men, lean and hard-eyed, emerged from the hogans, rifles in their hands. They were few. They were the remnants, the ones who had hidden, the ones who had escaped the long walk. They saw Kai. Their faces showed recognition, but not welcome. Then they saw Evelyn. Their expressions turned to cold stone. An old woman, her face a beautiful map of wrinkles, walked out of the largest hogan. She wore traditional velvet, and her gray hair was bound in a tsayil. She stopped 10 feet from Kai and looked at him, then her gaze fixed on Evelyn, and it was filled with a deep, ancient hatred. "Why have you brought this?" the old woman asked in the Navajo tongue. She did not say who. She said this: "Have you not done enough, little scout? You bring the enemy to our last hiding place." Kai slid from his horse, his legs buckling slightly. He stood tall, though Evelyn could see the sweat of fever on his brow. "She is not the enemy, grandmother," Kai said, his voice rough. "She is hunted by the bluecoats, as we are. She is Belagana." The woman spat. "A white one. She is the reason we are hunted. She is the reason the earth is stained." Kai took a step forward. "She saved my life, and I saved hers. We are bound by this. I ask for sanctuary, for myself, and for her." The old woman looked at his arm, at the bloody, makeshift bandage. Her eyes softened almost imperceptibly. "You are bleeding. You are my sister's son. You will be tended. But she is a wasp in our home. She will bring the sting." Kai turned to Evelyn. "They will not harm you, but they do not trust you. Give me your horse's reins." Evelyn did as he asked, her body rigid with pride and fear. She was an invader here. She understood the word, truly, for the first time. "He is my son," the old woman said, switching to the rough English of the trading posts. "I am called Old Woman Sings. You will stay where we can see you. You will not enter a hogan. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will earn the water you drink." Kai was led away by two men, his body swaying with exhaustion. He looked back at Evelyn once, his eyes dark with a warning. "Be still, be smart." Evelyn was left standing alone by the stream. The children stared at her, small, silent shadows. The women went back to their grinding, their movements sharp, angry. She stood for an hour. The sun beat down. No one offered her water. No one offered her shade. She was a ghost, a thing to be ignored. Her father's voice echoed in her head. Hartleys are not weak. She untied the small cup from her saddle. She walked to the stream, dipped it in, and drank. The water was cold and sweet. Then she walked to Apollo, who stood hip-shot and weary, and began to groom him with her bare hands, pulling the burrs and dirt from his long coat. She would not be weak. She worked all day. She saw the women hauling heavy skins of water from the spring. She picked up 2 empty skins and hauled them herself. The women watched her, their faces impassive. When she finished, she sat by her horse, her back against the canyon wall, and waited. As darkness fell, a small girl, perhaps 6 years old, crept near. She held out a piece of hard, blue cornbread. Evelyn looked at the girl, then at the bread. She took it. "Thank you," Evelyn whispered. The girl stared at her ruined blue dress. "You are like the sky," the girl said in perfect English, then turned and ran. Evelyn ate the bread. It was the hardest, driest, most delicious food she had ever tasted. She spent 3 days in that camp. She slept under her saddle blanket near Apollo, separated from the dine. She learned by watching. She learned to find the dry roots of greasewood for a fire that gave off almost no smoke. She learned which plants the women gathered to mix with the cornmeal. She watched Old Woman Sings tend to Kai's wound. The old woman had thrown away Evelyn's silk bandage with a grunt of disgust. She had cleansed the wound, which was badly infected, with a dark, pungent paste of juniper and sage. She chanted as she worked, her voice a low hum. Kai lay in the hogan, deep in a fever. Evelyn was not allowed to see him. On the 3rd night, she sat by the small fire allotted to her. Old Woman Sings sat with the children near the main fire. She was telling a story, her voice rising and falling in the night air. Evelyn listened. "The holy people," the old woman said, "teach us that all things must be in balance. When the world is out of balance, monsters are born. The Nakai, the Mexicans, were a kind of monster. They came and stole our children, and so we fought. And the fighting never ended. There was a great warrior. The people called him the Wind's Son, because he was fast and could not be caught. One night, the holy people came to him in a dream. They said, 'The war will not end with your arrows. It will end with your heart. You must take a wife from the enemy. You must love what you hate. Only then will the monster die. Only then will there be Hozo, balance, again.' And so the Wind's Son took a Nakai wife. His people cast him out. Her people tried to kill him. But he loved her, and she him, and their son was the first of a new people, and the war ended." Evelyn looked away from the fire, into the deep shadows where the hogan stood. "You must love what you hate." On the fourth day, Kai emerged. He was weak, and his arm was bound in a sling of clean buckskin. But the fever had broken. Old woman Sings had saved his arm. He walked to where Evelyn sat mending her saddle's bridle. He sat down across from her. "You are still here," he said. "I had nowhere else to go," she replied, not looking up from her work. "You have worked. My grandmother sees this. She says you have strong hands for a white woman." "A high compliment," Evelyn said, her voice dry. "It is," he said gravely. From her. He was quiet for a moment. "The medicine man, the Hatali, says I have been stained by the white world, by the violence in the alley. I must have a ceremony, a blessing way, to make me clean again." "Will it work?" she asked. "It must." The ceremony was held that night. The moon was a bright, full circle, illuminating the canyon. Evelyn was permitted to watch, standing at the entrance of the main hogan. The air was thick with the scent of burning herbs and the low, hypnotic sound of chanting. The medicine man created a painting on the floor, a ika, using sand of different colors, white, blue, yellow, and black. Kai sat in the center of it. His hair was washed, and his body was stripped to a breechcloth. The firelight played over his scarred back, but in the sacred space, they did not look like wounds. They looked like history. He was no longer the desperate, hunted man from the alley. He was part of something ancient. The chant rose, a prayer for harmony, for beauty, for a return to balance. Kai looked up, his eyes finding Evelyn's in the darkness. She stood in her filthy, torn dress. An outcast. He sat in the center of his universe, being made whole, in that long, silent look. The world shifted. She no longer saw a savage. She saw a man of deep, powerful conviction. A man tied to the earth in a way she had never dreamed possible. She saw the beauty in his strength, a strength that came not from a gun, but from the sand, the chants, the hos-ho. He no longer saw a white woman, an arrogant child of his oppressors. He saw the woman who had cut her finery to bandage him. He saw the woman who had hauled water without complaint, who had accepted the judgment of his people, and who had not broken. He saw the woman who had stood her ground, alone. He saw her, and she saw him. The ceremony ended at dawn. A profound, weary peace settled over the camp. It lasted until midday. A shout came from the lookout on the canyon rim. A young boy came scrambling down the rocks, his face pale with terror. "Soldiers!" he cried, falling breathless at Kai's feet. "Many soldiers. They are not lost. They are coming fast. They have a Dine Scout with them." Panic rippled through the camp. Women grabbed their children. Men ran for their rifles. Old woman Sings looked at Kai. "A scout! How do they know the way?" "He is a Dine," the boy gasped. "But he is not one of us. He is from the Coyote Pass people. And he had this." The boy pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his belt. He gave it to Kai. Kai unfolded it. Evelyn stepped closer to read it. It was a military warrant, issued by General Samuel Dorn. It named Kai Nez as an escaped military prisoner, wanted for desertion, murder, and the kidnapping of Miss Evelyn Hartley. "Kidnapping?" Evelyn whispered, her blood running cold. "He is twisting it. He is using the army to hunt me. He is using the army to hunt me." Kai said, his voice flat. "I was never a prisoner. Not in that way. He has made me a deserter, an enemy." Old woman Singh struck the paper from his hand. "This is her fault she has brought him. He will kill us all to get her back." "He is right," a man shouted, leveling his rifle at Evelyn. "Give her to him. It is the white woman he wants." "No!" Kai shouted, stepping in front of Evelyn, shielding her with his body. "You would sacrifice us," old woman Sings whispered, her face a mask of betrayal. "For her, I will not sacrifice anyone," Kai said, his voice ringing with authority. "They have a scout. He will find this place, even if we give her up." "We cannot fight them. We must run, all of us, to the high mesas." "We cannot all make it," the old woman said, tears streaming down her face. "My legs are old. The children are slow." Evelyn looked at the ring of terrified, angry faces. She looked at the children hiding behind their mother's skirts. She understood the story of the wind son. You must love what you hate. She stepped out from behind Kai. "He is right," she said, her voice clear and strong. "You cannot all run, but I can." She turned to Kai. "I will not be the cause of this. I will not have their deaths on my hands. Give me my horse. I will ride out. I will lead them away. When they catch me, it will be over." Kai stared at her. He saw the terror in her eyes, but he also saw the iron resolve. She meant it. She was offering herself. He looked at his grandmother. He looked at the children. Then he looked back at Evelyn. He reached out and took her arm. His grip was not rough this time. It was firm. "No," he said, his voice low. "You will not ride out. We will, you and I." He turned to old woman Sings. "Grandmother, take the people to the high cave, the one by the spider rock. Move quickly. We will lead the soldiers west, through the Devil's River Canyon. They will follow us. We are the ones they want." "Kai," Evelyn protested. "You cannot. Your arm?" "My arm is fine." He lied. "And my horse is fast." He looked deep into her eyes. "I will not let you go alone. I will not let him have you. That is my choice." Old woman Sings nodded. Her eyes filled with a new, terrible understanding. "You are the wind's son," she whispered. Kai pulled Evelyn toward the horses. "You said you wanted to be free," he said, throwing her saddle onto Apollo. "Freedom is not given. It is taken." Shots echoed from the mouth of the canyon. The scout was firing, signaling the soldiers. "Now!" Kai yelled. "Ride!" They rode west, into the throat of the land God had forgotten. Kai called this the Devil's River Canyon, but it was not one canyon. It was 1,000. A cracked and blistering maze of sun-baked rock and alkali flats. The pursuit was relentless. They did not see the soldiers, but they felt them. A pressure on the horizon, a distant echo of the bugle that Evelyn imagined she could still hear in the blood pounding in her ears. They rode for 3 days through the furnace. The heat was a physical weight, a heavy, suffocating blanket. The world had been bleached of color, leaving only brown rock and a white sky. The horses suffered. Apollo, bred for the green grasses of England, was struggling, his coat lathered, his breathing harsh. Kai's pony, born of this land, fared better, but its head was low. They had 1 canteen of water left. They had not drunk in a full day. Kai stopped, pulling his pony into the sliver of shade offered by a red rock spire. He dismounted, his body moving with a stiff, pained grace. His arm, rebound in the last of Evelyn's silk, was a constant, dull fire. He offered the canteen to her. Evelyn looked at it, her tongue a dry, swollen thing in her mouth. "You first," she croaked. "No," he said. His voice was a rasp. "The horses drink before the man. The woman drinks before the warrior. That is a stupid rule," she argued, her pride still burning. "You are wounded. You will die without it. Drink," he commanded. It was not a request. She took the canteen. She wet her lips, then took a small, painful swallow. She held it out to him. "Now you—" He stared at her, then took the canteen and drank. He left 1/3 of it. He walked to the horses, pouring a few precious drops into his cupped hand for each, letting them lick the moisture from his palm. They sat in the shade, the silence absolute. "They are still coming," Evelyn whispered. "I know," Kai said. He was watching the rocks above them. His eyes narrowed. "Dorn wants you, but the scout, the one from Coyote Pass, he wants me. He hunts for the bounty. He will not stop. How long can we go on?" "As long as the horses can—" They rested for an hour. The sun had just passed its zenith. Kai rose, his movements economical, saving every scrap of energy. He walked to a patch of withered, thorny brush, pulling his knife. "What are you doing?" she asked. "There is water in the root," he said. "Not much, but enough." He knelt, his back to her. and began to dig at the hard-baked earth with his knife and his good hand. Evelyn watched him, her gaze fixed on the slow, determined movement of his shoulders. The sound was small, a dry, deadly rattle. A sidewinder, the color of the pale sand, had been coiled under the next bush. It struck, not at Kai, but at the ground where his hand had been a second before. Kai froze. He had not seen it. His fevered senses were slow. The snake coiled again, its head pulling back. Evelyn did not scream. Her body reacted, fueled by years of ranch life. She grabbed the heavy, flat rock next to her and threw it with all her strength. "Kai!" Her voice was a sharp crack. He rolled backward as her rock struck the snake. A dull, heavy thud. The rock pinned the snake's middle. It writhed, its fangs exposed, rattling in a furious panic. Kai was on his feet, his knife in his hand. He lunged and severed the snake's head with one clean, swift motion. Swift. The body twisted in the dust. Kai stood, breathing heavily. He looked at the dead snake. He looked at the rock. Then he looked at her. She was trembling. The reaction setting in. "You are fast," he said, his voice quiet. "Faster than the snake." "I hate snakes," she whispered, her hands clenched. He nodded, a flicker of something new in his eyes. Respect. He had protected her, but she had just saved his life. The scales had balanced. "The fear of death," he said, looking at the dead creature. "It makes you see what is worth living for." He did not say anything else. He retrieved the root, and they shared the bitter, woody moisture. That night, they rode under the moon. As the air was cooler, the pursuit was close. They had seen the smoke from the soldiers' cook fire, miles back, but drawing nearer. They were in a wide, dry riverbed, the sand soft, slowing the horses. "We must rest," Kai said, his voice strained. The day's heat and the near-death encounter had drained him. They found a small alcove hidden by mesquite. They built no fire. "Kai!" she said in the darkness. "Why are you doing this? You could have left me at the camp. You could have saved yourself." He was silent for a long time. She thought he had fallen asleep. "When I was a boy," he said finally, his voice low. "Before the long walk, my grandfather showed me the borders of our land. Dinebikea. It was not marked by fences. It was marked by the 4 sacred mountains. Mount Taylor in the south, San Francisco Peaks in the west, Hesperus Peak in the north, Blanca Peak in the east. He said, 'Everything inside this is our home. It is where the holy people placed us.' It was a world." He shifted, the pain in his arm a constant companion. "The bluecoats. They took us from that world. They put us in a pen. They fed us rotten corn and dirty meat. They made us forget the mountains. When they let us return, they said, 'This part is yours, this little square. Do not cross this line, or we will shoot you.' They call it a reservation. Aaron, it is not a home," he continued, his voice hardening with a cold passion. "It is a cage, a place to keep livestock." Evelyn listened, her heart aching. She thought of her father's fences, of Dorn's fort. "I am not fighting the Belagana," he said. "I am not trying to win a war. I am just trying to find a place that is not a cage, a place in the high mountains, where the air is clean, where my sister, if I find her, can be safe, where my people can live and die by the sun, not by a white man's clock. I want my land back, not all of it, just a piece of it that is free." She had never heard a man speak like this. Her father spoke of holdings and property. Dorn spoke of territory and conquest. Kai spoke of living, for the first time in her life. She believed in something more than her own survival. She believed in his dream of a free land. It was a more honest ideal than any family honor she had ever known. "I hope you find it," she whispered. Before he could answer, a low rumble filled the air. It was not thunder. Kai was on his feet instantly. "The horses get the horses." The sky was not raining, but the sound was growing, a deep, grinding roar. "What is it?" Evelyn cried. running to Apollo. "Flash flood," Kai yelled. "The storm is in the mountains, miles away. The water is coming. Get to high ground now." A wall of brown, churning water, 10 feet high, appeared at the bend in the riverbed. It was not water. It was a liquid monster, carrying trees, rocks, and debris. They spurred the horses. Scrambling up the sandy bank of the wash, Apollo, panicked, reared. The stallion lost his footing in the soft sand. Evelyn screamed as he went down. Throwing her, she landed hard, her ankle twisting under her. The water hit her. It was brutally cold, a solid, moving wall. It snatched her breath, tumbling her over and over in the mud and grit. She heard the stallion scream. A hand grabbed the collar of her shirt. Kai. He had thrown himself from his pony and lunged for her. He had his good arm hooked around a low-hanging, stubborn juniper root, and he held her with the other. "Hold on," he roared over the din. The water tore at them, trying to rip them from the bank. It was a liquid avalanche, lasting only minutes, but it felt like an eternity. The main force of the flood passed. Leaving a raging muddy river where a dry bed had been, Apollo was gone. Kai's pony stood trembling on the bank 50 yards away. Kai dragged Evelyn from the water. She was coughing, spitting mud, her body shaking violently. She tried to stand, but a sharp, white, hot pain shot up her leg. She cried out and collapsed. "My ankle," she gasped. "It is broken." Kai looked at her, his face grim in the moonlight. He looked at the raging river and at the far bank. They were trapped on a narrow, shrinking ledge. "It is not broken," he said, his voice raw. "But you cannot ride." He whistled. His pony, loyal, picked its way closer. "We have lost everything," Evelyn whispered, tears of pain and despair tracing clean lines through the mud on her face. "The stallion, our supplies." "We are alive," he said. He lifted her, his wounded arm taking the strain, his face a mask of agony. He placed her on the pony. He led the pony through the shallow, swirling water at the edge of the flood, looking for a way up the canyon wall. The rain began to fall. Not a gentle rain, but a cold, driving downpour. "There," he said, pointing. A dark opening in the rock. A shallow cave just above the new waterline. He half carried, half dragged her inside. It was not a cave, just a hollow in the rock. But it was shelter from the rain. They were soaked, freezing. Their one blanket had been washed away. "Fire!" Evelyn shivered, her teeth chattering. Kai fumbled with his flint and steel. His hands were numb. His bad arm was useless, and he was shaking from the cold and the infection. He could not make a spark. I cannot," he said, his voice full of a terrible, hollow defeat. Evelyn watched him. He was dying. The cold was killing him faster than the bullet. She crawled to him. "Give it to me." She took the flint. Her own hands were scraped raw, but she was driven by a desperate, cold fury. She would not let him die. She found a dry scrap of tinder in his small medicine pouch. She struck the flint. Once, twice. A spark caught. She blew on it, gently, nursing the tiny ember. She fed it scraps of dry bark she tore from the cave wall. A small, red flame bloomed. A fire. It was not enough. The fire was small, the night was cold, and the rain was relentless. Kai was shivering, a deep, body-racking tremor that he could not control. His eyes were glassy. "Kai," she said. He looked at her, his gaze distant. "We will die if we sit apart," she said, her voice practical, sharp. She moved to him. He was leaning against the wall, and she sat beside him, pressing her body against his. He flinched, his pride still fighting, but he was too weak. "Be still," she commanded, her voice softer. She pushed her way under his wet saddle blanket, wrapping it around both of them. She put her arms around his chest, pulling his back against her front, shielding him from the cold. His body was rigid at first, a block of ice and pain. Then, slowly, a shudder ran through him. A sigh. He relaxed, leaning his weight against her. She held him. She held him as the red fire painted their shadows on the rock wall. She could feel the labor of his breathing, the rapid, fevered pulse beneath her hands. His scarred back was pressed against her. She could feel the history of his pain. He was not a savage. He was not an enemy. He was a man, and he was hers. The realization was as simple and as absolute as the stone around them. His shivering slowly subsided. His breathing deepened. He was asleep. His nights echoed with her touch. This was the touch. It was not the touch of a lover. It was the touch of life itself. The silent, desperate grip of one survivor holding on to another. Evelyn Hartley held Kai Nez through the long, cold night, her own fear and pain forgotten. She held him, watching the fire burn down to red embers, and for the first time in her life, she was not running from anything. She was holding on to the only thing that mattered. The rain stopped just before dawn. The canyon was eerily silent, save for the rush of the dwindling river. Kai woke first. He was still in her arms. He did not move for a long moment. Then, slowly, he turned. He was weak, his face pale, but the fever had receded from his eyes. He looked at her, his face just inches from hers. The mud was caked on her skin, her hair a tangled mess. He had never seen anything so beautiful. "Eve," he whispered. Her name. She opened her eyes. A sound cut the morning stillness. A rock dislodged, clattering down the canyon wall. Kai was on his feet in an instant, pushing her back into the shadows. He moved to the mouth of the cave. He looked down. The mud, soft from the rain, held their tracks perfectly. The tracks from his pony, the tracks from her boots, all leading into the small cave, and in the canyon below, a line of blue-coated soldiers was fanning out. At their head was General Samuel Dorn, his field glasses raised. Beside him, the dying scout from Coyote Pass pointed. He pointed not just at the canyon, he pointed directly at the cave. "They have found us," Kai said, his voice flat. Dorn lowered his glasses. He looked up at their hiding place, and across the distance. Evelyn could see him smile. They were trapped. "Kai Nez," the voice boomed across the canyon, amplified by the rock walls. It was General Samuel Dorn, and his voice was laced with a terrible, triumphant amusement. "And the lovely Miss Hartley. How primitive. Do come down from your nest." Kai pushed Evelyn behind him, into the shallowest part of the cave. He had his knife. It was all he had. Her ankle was useless. They could not run. They could not fight. "We have 20 rifles aimed at that hole. Nez," Dorn called out, his voice hardening. "I would hate for a stray bullet to damage the lady. Send her out first." "Go to hell," Kai snarled, his voice low. "He refuses," Dorn said to someone below. "Very well, Sergeant. Put a volley into the opening." "No!" Evelyn screamed. She grabbed Kai's good arm. "He will kill us both." "He will kill us anyway," Kai said, his eyes dark. "He cannot let you live to tell this story." "Kai," she pleaded, "my ankle, I cannot run. You must go." He looked at her as if she were insane. "There must be a back way." She insisted. "There is no back way," he said. He looked at the soldiers below, who were taking aim. He saw the Navajo scout, TSO, smiling as he chambered around. "He wants you alive. Evelyn," Kai whispered, his voice urgent. "He will not shoot to kill. Not you, me. He will kill me and take you." "I will not." "Throw down your knife, Nez," Dorn shouted again, "or we will burn you out." Kai looked at the small, dead fire and the single, exhausted pony. He looked at Evelyn's face, pale with terror but set with defiance. He had made his choice in the camp. He would not unmake it now. He kissed her. It was not a kiss of love. It was a kiss of desperation, hard and fast, tasting of mud, fear, and finality. It was a promise. "When I am gone, he whispered. "Do not fight him. Liv, wait. Find my sister." Before she could answer, he stepped out of the cave, his hands raised, his good arm and his wounded one. "I'm here," he called out. "She is hurt. She needs a doctor." "She cannot walk." Dorn laughed, a short, sharp bark. "He bargains. How civilized. Throw down the knife." Kai let the blade drop. It clattered down the rocks. A small, final sound. "Secure him," Dorn ordered. Soldiers scrambled up the slick rock. They were not gentle. They slammed Kai against the wall. His wounded shoulder taking the impact, he grunted in pain. They bound his hands behind his back with a leather thong, pulling it cruelly tight. Dorn himself appeared at the mouth of the cave. He was immaculate, his blue uniform clean despite the chase. He looked at the muddy hollow, at the shared blanket, at the remains of the tiny fire. His eyes, cold and blue, settled on Evelyn. "Get up," he commanded. "I cannot," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "My ankle is—" He staggered. He grabbed her by the arm, yanking her to her feet. She screamed as her weight came down on the injured ankle. The pain was a white-hot fire, and she collapsed. "You see," she gasped from the ground. "I see a filthy, disobedient child." He sneered. He gestured to two soldiers. "Carry her and bring the savage. This chase is over." They were taken down to the canyon floor. A temporary camp was already being established. Tents were rising. A fire was lit. Kai was thrown to the ground near a wagon wheel. His feet bound. He was left in the full, hot sun. Evelyn was dumped less gently near Dorn's command tent. Dorn pulled up a camp stool and sat in front of her. He was perfectly calm. "You have caused me a great deal of trouble, Evelyn. You have cost the army valuable time and resources. You have consorted with a fugitive, and you have murdered 2 men in Dry Bluff." "I murdered no one," she cried. "Kai was defending me, and I told you they shot him." Dorn smiled, a thin, reptilian expression. "That is not what the witnesses recall. They recall you, hysterical, holding a pistol, and him bleeding. It seems quite clear you shot him while he was attempting to, shall we say, force his attentions on you." Evelyn stared at him, the lie so vast, so complete, it stole her breath. "That is not true. You know it. It is the truth that will be recorded," Dorn said smoothly. "You were rescued. I am your savior." He turned his attention. Nez, Kai, his head bowed, did not look up. "Your people," Dorn said, his voice conversational. "The ones who ran from the camp. Where did they go?" Kai remained silent. His breathing was shallow, his body rigid with pain. "He is a stubborn animal." Dorn sighed, looking back at Evelyn. "He does not understand persuasion. Perhaps you can help me." "I will tell you nothing." She spat. "Oh, you will not have to," Dorn said. He nodded to the sergeant, a thick-necked man with cold eyes. "Sergeant, the prisoner is resisting. Question him." The sergeant walked to Kai. He kicked him, hard, in the ribs. Kai gasped, his body curling. "Stop it!" Evelyn screamed, scrambling forward. A guard put his boot on her good leg, shoving her back. "Where's the camp?" "Indian," the sergeant growled, looming over Kai. Kai spat blood and sand onto the man's boot. The sergeant's face flushed. He drew back his fist and struck Kai in the face. And again, the sound of the blows was heavy and wet. "Evelyn, watch!" Dorn ordered, his voice sharp. "This is the consequence of your choice. This is the filth you chose over me. Over civilization. You are the filth," she sobbed. "You are the monster." Dorn ignored her. "This is inefficient," he said. He walked over to Kai, who was now bleeding freely from his nose and a cut over his eye. Dorn looked down at him with an expression of mild distaste. "He is wounded," Dorn observed. He reached down and, with a deliberate, almost casual motion, grabbed the buckskin sling around Kai's neck and ripped it away. Kai screamed. It was not a yell. It was a deep, guttural sound of pure, unadulterated agony as his shattered shoulder took the jolt. "Let him go!" Evelyn was frantic, pulling uselessly at the guard. Dorn examined the wound, which was raw and swollen. the black thread of infection stark against the skin. This is badly infected. It stinks. It must be cleaned. He looked at the fire, where the soldiers were heating coffee. TSO, bring me a ramrod. Put it in the coals. The Navajo scout smiled and obeyed. Evelyn went cold. What are you doing? I am a merciful man, Dorn said, his eyes glittering. The wound must be cauterized. To stop the spread of the infection, it is the only humane thing to do. Unless... He knelt, bringing his face close to Kai's. Unless he tells me what I want to know. The location of the renegades. A canyon. A mesa. Give me a name. Savage. And this pain will stop. Kai was shaking, his body slick with sweat. He was trying to push himself up with his good arm. He looked past Dorn, at Evelyn. His eyes were furnaces of pain, but they held a message. Do not break. Do not look away. Be strong. He turned his bloody face to Dorn. He spoke, his voice a dry rasp. He said one word in the Navajo language. TSO, who was bringing the glowing red rod from the fire, barked a laugh. He says, Ho-zo. Harmony. Dorn looked confused. What does he mean? He mocks you, General, TSO said, his smile vanishing. He prays for beauty. For you. Dorn's civilized mask cracked. His face contorted with rage. He prays. Does he? We will see what his gods do for him now. He stood, took the ramrod from TSO. No, Evelyn shrieked. Please, Samuel, do not do this. I will tell you, it was. Be silent, Kai roared, the last of his strength going into the command. Do not speak. Dorn looked at him. You would protect them. He pressed the glowing hot iron into the raw, open wound on Kai's shoulder. The smell of burning flesh and hair filled the air. Kai's body arched off the ground. He did not scream. He roared. It was the sound of a mountain breaking, a sound of agony so profound it shook the very air. He thrashed against the ropes. A terrible, violent spasm, and then, as the sergeant held him down, he went limp. He was unconscious. Evelyn was silent. She could not scream. She could not breathe. She was just a hollow, empty thing, watching as the smoke rose from his body. Dorn threw the ramrod to the ground, his chest heaving. He was breathing hard, a fine sheen of sweat on his face. He wiped his hands on a cloth. He walked back to Evelyn. He stood over her, breathing like a winded horse. You, she whispered, her voice dead. He reached down and grabbed a handful of her muddy hair, yanking her head back until her spine cracked. You did this? He hissed, his face inches from hers. You made this necessary. You chose him. I hate you, she breathed. He slapped her. The blow was so hard it snapped her head to the side, and she tasted her own blood. You will learn respect, he said, his voice a low, shaking tremor of rage. You have dragged my name and your father's name through the filth of this land. You have lived with him, slept with him. I did not. It does not matter, he bellowed, his control shattering. It does not matter what is true. It only matters what is seen. You are sullied, ruined. But I will have you. I will cleanse you. He let go of her hair, pushing her face into the dirt. I will restore your honor. You will be washed. You will be given clean clothes, a soldier's uniform if we must. And tomorrow, at dawn, the chaplain will arrive from the fort. He will marry us. She looked up, horrified. Spitting dirt. Marry. You. I would rather he had killed me. That is no longer your choice, Dorn said. He was calm again. The mask was back in place. You will be Mrs. Samuel Dorn. You will legitimize my claim on your father's land. An arrangement he has already agreed to, and you will do it with a smile. And after the wedding, as my wife, you will stand and watch as I hang your savage lover for desertion, murder, and the abduction of a white woman. He turned. Sergeant, put her in the supply tent, tie her, and post a guard. See that the prisoner is comfortable. I want him alive for the morning. Night fell like a stone. Evelyn was tied. hand and foot, and thrown into a dark tent. Her ankle was a universe of pain. Her heart was a cold, dead cinder. Outside, she could hear the soldiers laughing, the occasional groan from the wagon wheel where Kai was tied. She worked at the ropes. They were rough hemp, and her hands were raw. But she worked. She was driven by a single, cold thought. She would not be his wife. It took hours. The camp fell silent. The guard outside her tent was a young private, and she could hear his breathing change as he dozed. Her hands came free. She waited. Her heart was a hammer. She untied her feet. Her ankle was swollen to twice its size, but she did not care. She found her knife, the small one from her boot, which the soldiers had, in their arrogance, overlooked. She crawled to the back of the tent and sliced a long, silent line in the canvas. She slipped out into the darkness. The camp was asleep. A single fire burned low. The guard at her tent was slumped over. Another guard sat near the fire, his back to her. Kai was where they had left him, slumped against the wheel. She thought he was dead. She crawled, dragging her useless leg through the dirt, every movement an agony. She reached him. "Kai," she whispered, her hand on his face. His eyes snapped open. They were alive, and they were burning. She showed him the knife. She began to saw at the thick ropes on his wrists. The guard by the fire stood, stretching. He began to walk his perimeter. He was walking toward them. "Faster!" Kai hissed, his voice a dry crackle. The rope snapped free. At that exact moment, the guard turned. He saw them, the two shadows by the wagon. "Halt!" he yelled. "Prisoner escape!" Kai did not wait to untie his feet. He lunged, his body propelled by pure will. He struck the guard low, his good shoulder hitting the man's stomach. The guard went down, his rifle clattering. Kai grabbed the rifle. "The horses!" he yelled. Evelyn was already hobbling, crawling toward the picket line. The camp exploded. Men poured from tents, shouting, grabbing weapons. "Evelyn, get on!" Kai was at the horses, cutting two free. He grabbed her, his good arm like a band of steel around her waist, and threw her bodily onto the back of a horse. She screamed as she landed, but she grabbed the mane. A shot rang out. A bullet whined past her ear. Kai swung onto his own mount, the stolen rifle in his hand. "Fire!" a voice roared. "Shoot them!" Kai fired the rifle, not at the men. He fired at the lantern hanging over the ammunition wagon. The lantern exploded. Oil and flame cascaded over the wagon canvas. "Ride!" he bellowed. He slapped the rump of her horse, and it bolted. They plunged into the dark canyon just as the ammunition wagon caught. A figure stepped out of the command tent, framed against the new, bright fire. General Dorn. He held a revolver in his hand. He saw them. He saw her. Escaping. Again. "Evelyn!" he roared, his voice a sound of pure, primal rage. He raised his pistol and aimed, not at Kai, but at her. He was calm. He was taking his time. Kai, riding at a full gallop, his body half broken, raised the rifle. He had one good arm, one eye swollen shut. He fired once. It was not a shot to kill. It was a shot to stop. Dorn cried out, a high, thin sound. He did not fall. He stumbled, grabbing his right shoulder. His gun arm. The revolver fell from his useless fingers into the dirt. Kai did not fire again. He looked at his disarmed enemy, a black silhouette against the growing inferno. He had shown mercy. He had chosen Hozo. He wheeled his horse, grabbed the bridle of Evelyn's mount, and pulled her with him as they disappeared into the darkness, leaving the sound of the burning camp and Dorn's screams of fury behind them. The horses were lathered, their breathing a broken rasping sound in the dark. The fire from Dorn's camp cast a monstrous, flickering glow against the canyon walls behind them, a burning eye that promised pursuit. They had one rifle, Kai's, and the saddlebag he had managed to cut free from the picket line. It was Evelyn's. It held her father's heavy Colt revolver and a box of ammunition. "He is hurt," Evelyn said, her voice a dry rasp. She rode beside him, her own body a symphony of pain. Her ankle throbbed with a deep, sickening pulse, but she ignored it. All her fear, all her will, was focused on the man who swayed in the saddle. Kai did not answer. He was riding on something other than strength. The cauterized wound on his shoulder, a terrible, blackened thing, had saved him from bleeding to death, but the shock and the infection were poison in his blood. His face was a mask of sweat and agony, his eyes half closed. Yet he led them on, his good hand firm on the reins, pushing his stolen horse north. "Where are we going?" she asked, though she already knew. "Home," he whispered. The word, a puff of air. "The Blood Mesa. It is the last place, the only place." They rode all night, a desperate, stumbling race against the dawn. They knew Dorn. They knew TSO. The pursuit would be immediate. The fire was a setback, not a defeat. When the first gray light of morning touched the sky, they saw it. It rose from the desert floor like a fortress, a massive, flat-topped mountain of dark red sandstone, its sheer cliffs catching the new sun and glowing as if lit from within. It was a sacred, terrible, and beautiful place. "He will not follow us there," Evelyn prayed, her voice hoarse. "He will follow us to the end of the world." Kai said. He stopped his horse at the base of the mesa, at a narrow, winding trail only a goat could seemingly climb. "This is the spot. He will come, but here we choose the ground." He was near collapse. As they dismounted, his legs gave way. Evelyn, dragging her own useless foot, caught him, her small frame straining under his weight. The camp was hidden in a high cleft, sheltered by ancient junipers. Old woman Singh saw them first. The anger was gone from her eyes, replaced by a deep, weary sorrow. She ran to Kai, her hands fluttering over his body, seeing the new burns, the beaten face, the fresh blood on his shirt. "They have done this," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They are coming." Kai managed, his voice thick. The bluecoats, all of them. The remaining warriors of their small band gathered. There were 15 men left who could hold a rifle or a bow. They were old, or they were young, or they were weary. Kai was laid upon a blanket. The Hatali, the medicine man, was summoned. He looked at the cauterized wound. He looked at the new, dark stain spreading across Kai's chest, where Dorn's bullet had gone. He closed his eyes and began to chant, but his voice was one of mourning. "We must run," a warrior named Black Horse said. "We can scatter. Go to the high peaks." "No." The voice was Kai's, but it was thin, a thread of steel. He pushed himself up onto his one good elbow, his face as pale as ash. Evelyn knelt behind him, her hands on his good shoulder, supporting his weight. "We have run," Kai said, his voice gaining a terrible clarity. "I have run from them my whole life, from their forts, their chains, their reservations. Now, they have followed me to the home of the holy people. Here. We do not run." He looked at the faces around him. "He will not stop. Not until he has me, and not until he has her. Evil." "I am not fighting to win," Kai said, spitting blood. "I am fighting to stop him. This is our land. He is the trespasser. We will make him pay for every step he takes on sacred ground." His gaze fell on Evelyn. "This is my fight, but he comes for you. He comes for both of us," she said, her voice steady. "Then we will face him together." A silence fell. It was the silence of a choice made. The warriors looked at Kai, and then at the white woman who held him. They saw one heart. "We will fight," Black Horse said, and he picked up his rifle. The camp became a flurry of desperate preparation. The women and children were moved higher up the mesa, into the ceremonial caves. Old woman Sings bound Evelyn's ankle with strips of wet leather, pulling them so tight her foot went numb. "You cannot walk," she said. "I can ride." Evelyn replied. She checked her father's colt, the chambers full. She had no horse. Apollo was gone. A young woman, not much older than Evelyn, whose husband had died at Bosque Redondo, approached her. She held out a short, powerful Navajo hunting bow and a quiver of dogwood arrows. "I do not know how," Evelyn said, her hands shaking. "You have the eyes of a hawk," the woman said, her English learned from the forts. "You do not need to know. The bow knows. Let it fly where your anger points." Avov, she took the bow. She was a strange vision, this daughter of an Englishman, in the ruined silk dress of a life that was now ash. Her hair was a wild, tangled mess, her face caked with mud and blood. She strapped the quiver to her back and tucked the Colt into the waistband of her torn skirt. She found a pony, one of the tribes, and pulled herself onto its back. From the rim of the mesa, they watched them come, a long blue line of cavalry. 30 men, maybe more. Dorn was at their head, his right arm in a simple sling, his face a mask of cold fury. TSO, the scout, was beside him, pointing up the narrow track. "He is arrogant," Kai whispered from his position, where he lay propped against a rock. He was too weak to stand, but he held his rifle. "He thinks we are broken. He will charge. He wants it to be quick. Let them come," Old Woman Singh said. She sat nearby, her eyes closed, her hands beating a small drum. A low rhythmic chant began, a prayer to the holy people for strength in the final battle. The soldiers dismounted, beginning the long climb up the narrow path. They were exposed. "Now," Kai commanded. The first volley of arrows and bullets rained down. Men screamed. 2 soldiers fell from the path. Tumbling down the cliff face, the advance stopped. "They will try to flank us," Kai said, his voice weaker. He was coughing. "Black Horse, take 3 men. Watch the East Ridge." The battle raged for an hour. The soldiers were trapped, but they were disciplined. They used their long-range rifles, hiding behind the rocks below, firing up at the rim. An arrow struck a warrior in the throat. He fell without a sound. Eve was everywhere. She was the only one on horseback, a moving target, but she was fast. She rode from one position to the next, carrying skins of water, bringing new arrows, her injured leg dangling uselessly. She fired the bow. She fired it in terror, pulling the string back until her fingers bled, letting the arrows fly. She did not know if she hit anything. She only knew she was fighting. TSO, the scout, had found a way up. He appeared on the rim, his face painted, a knife in his hand. He lunged at a young boy who was holding a rifle. Evelyn saw him. She did not have time for the bow. She dropped the reins, drew the Colt, and fired. The sound was deafening. TSO stopped, looked at her in surprise, then clutched his stomach and fell. She had killed a man. She did not have time to feel it. "Charge!" Dorn's voice came from below, enraged by the loss of his scout. $10 for the man who brings me Nez's head." The soldiers, spurred by the promise of money and the rage of their leader, charged up the path. They overwhelmed the first line of defense. The battle became a chaotic, swirling melee of hand-to-hand combat. It was brutal. Knives and rifle butts. The warriors fought with the strength of ancestors, but they were too few. Black Horse was down. The old men were falling. Kai saw it. He saw his people being slaughtered. With a roar that came from the earth itself, he rose to his feet. He was a terrible, beautiful sight. A dying man, his body broken, his eyes burning with the fire of a god. He raised his rifle with his good arm. He fired. A soldier fell. He fired again. Another. His movement had exposed him. He stood on the rock, clear against the blue sky. A perfect target. General Samuel Dorn reached the rim of the mesa. He saw Kai. He had been waiting for this moment. His right arm was useless in its sling, but his left hand was steady. He raised his service revolver. "Nez," he roared, a sound of pure triumph. He fired. The bullet struck Kai high in the chest. Kai staggered. He looked down, surprised, at the new, dark flower of blood blooming on his shirt. The rifle slipped from his fingers. He crumpled to his knees, his eyes finding Evelyn's. "No!" Evelyn's scream was a tear in the fabric of the world. She saw it all. Kai falling, Dorn, his face a mask of victory, taking a step closer, raising his pistol again for the final, killing shot. She dropped the bow. She spurred her pony forward, charging into the center of the fight. her father's Colt revolver in her hand. She did not aim. She did not think. She pointed the gun at the center of Dorn's blue uniform and pulled the trigger. 1, 2. The first shot went wide, screaming past Dorn's head. The second shot struck him square in the chest. The battle stopped. Every man, soldier and warrior, froze. Dorn did not fall. He stood rigid, the smoking revolver still in his left hand. The look of triumph on his face was replaced by a profound, almost comical shock. He looked down at the dark hole in his uniform. He looked up at Evelyn, who sat on her panting horse. The Colt still aimed at him, her entire body shaking. He swayed. He dropped his gun. He took one step, then another, his legs clumsy. Evelyn slid from the horse. She landed hard on her good leg, her injured ankle collapsing under her. She did not care. She hobbled forward, the gun still raised. She stopped a few feet from him. He was dying. He was staring at her, his blue eyes wide with the final, cold understanding. He looked past her, at Kai's unmoving form on the rocks. Dorn gurgled. Blood frothed at his lips. He is not worthy of you, a savage, filth. Evelyn looked at the man who had hunted her, the man who had represented law and order and civilization. He was just a dying, spiteful thing. She felt a vast, cold calm. No one is worthy of love, she said, her voice clear and strong in the sudden, ringing silence. They are only brave enough to hold it. Dorn's eyes lost their focus. The last of his strength left him. He sank to his knees, and then, without a sound, pitched forward onto the sacred red earth of the blood mesa. He was dead. The remaining soldiers, perhaps a dozen of them, stared at their dead commander. They looked at the handful of Navajo warriors, battered but alive. They looked at the white woman with a smoking gun. One by one, they dropped their rifles. The fight was over. Evelyn did not see them. She did not hear the silence. She had already dropped the Colt. She was scrambling, crawling, pulling herself over the sharp rocks, her hands bleeding. "Kai!" she sobbed, the word torn from her. "Kai, please, do not leave me." She reached his still body. She reached him. He was lying on the red sandstone, a still, broken shape against the earth he had fought for. His eyes were closed. A faint, shallow breath rattled in his chest, stained with blood. "Kai," she whispered, her hands hovering over him, afraid to touch, afraid the slightest pressure would break the last thread. The world came rushing back in. The battle was over. The surviving soldiers, leaderless and shocked, were surrounded by the remaining Navajo warriors. They looked at the body of their general, then at the woman who had killed him, and they offered no resistance. Old woman Sings was at Evelyn's side, her face a mask of stone, but her eyes were wild with a grief that had not yet broken. She knelt, her ancient wrinkled hands surprisingly steady as she tore open Kai's bloody shirt. The bullet was high, in the left side of his chest. It had not killed him instantly. It was killing him slowly. "He is breathing," Evelyn said, the words a desperate prayer. "He is leaving," the old woman replied, her voice flat. "The air escapes. His spirit follows." She looked up at the Hatali, the medicine man, who had survived the fight. "Hostin Kla, bring him to the high cave, the cave of the ancestors. We will sing him home." "No," Evelyn cried, grabbing the old woman's arm. "You will not sing him home. You will sing him back. You will heal him." Old woman Sings looked at Evelyn's fierce, mud-caked face. "He is beyond our songs. Child, that is a belagana wound. It is a wound of iron and malice. Our medicine is of pollen and earth." "Then use pollen and earth," Evelyn demanded, her voice rising with a desperate, hysterical strength. "Use something. Do not let him die." Two warriors, their own faces grim with wounds, gently lifted Kai. They made a chair of their arms and began to carry him up the final, highest path of the mesa. Evelyn tried to follow, but her ankle collapsed, sending her to the ground. She did not stop. She began to crawl. She dragged herself over the sharp rocks, her hands and knees bleeding, following the slow, solemn procession. The cave was not a dwelling. It was a holy place. The air was cool and still, smelling of ancient smoke and dry herbs. The walls were covered in pictographs, painted 1,000 years ago. Spirals of white and red, depictions of the holy people, of Ye, the monster, and of the hero twins who had defeated him. They laid Kai on a sacred buckskin in the center of the cave, before a fire pit that had not been lit in a generation. Hostinkla, the medicine man, lit the fire. He began to chant, his voice low and hypnotic, a prayer not for healing, but for safe passage. The Go in Peace song. "No," Evelyn said, dragging herself to the mouth of the cave. She was an outcast here, a white woman, a killer. She would not enter the sacred space without permission. Old Woman Sings looked at her, her eyes black and deep with sorrow. "He is my sister's son. He is the last of his line. Let him die in peace. He cannot die," Evelyn whispered, her body shaking. "I will not allow it." The Hatali began to prepare the death rites, painting Kai's face with white clay, to guide his spirit. Evelyn felt a rage so cold, so pure, it burned away her fear. She was not a part of this world, but she would not be excluded from this. She pulled herself into the cave, past the shocked silence of the women, and knelt at Kai's head. She did not have their medicine. She did not have their God. She had only her own will. She placed one hand on his forehead, which was cold with shock, and the other on his chest, over the terrible, seeping wound. The Hatali stopped chanting. Outraged, the Belagana woman defiles the ceremony. "Let her," Old Woman Sings whispered, watching. Evelyn closed her eyes. She did not pray to the God of her father, a distant, bearded man in a faraway church. She prayed to the gods of this place, to the red earth beneath her knees, to the smoke rising from the fire, to the painted spirits on the wall. "You cannot have him," she breathed, her voice a low, fierce hiss, a counter-rhythm to the medicine man's song. "He belongs here. He belongs to this land. He belongs to me. Do you hear me? I will not let you take him." Hosteen Kla began a new chant, the Hulaji, the life way. It was a desperate, complex song, used only when the spirit was halfway out the door. His voice rose, pleading with the holy people, offering pollen, offering turquoise, but Kai's breathing grew shallower. It stopped. The cave was silent. The only sound was the crackle of the fire. The Hatali let his hands fall. Defeated. Old Woman Sings covered her face, her shoulders shaking in a silent, final grief. Evelyn stared at his still pale face. No, she remembered. The women in the camp, the stories of the long walk, the way they cut their hair in grief, the sacrifice, an offering, a trade. Her hair. It was her last connection to the white world. The long, fine hair her father had admired, the hair Dorn had clutched in his fist. She reached for the knife still in her belt. The heavy blade Kai had used, the one she had used to cut him free. She grabbed a thick, heavy handful of her own tangled, muddy hair. "What is she doing?" the Hatali whispered, horrified. "It is a desecration." Evelyn did not answer. She began to saw at the thick lock of hair. The knife was heavy and not sharp enough for the task. It was a brutal, hacking motion. She tore at it, her arm aching, tears of effort and rage streaming down her face. One thick, long strand came free in her hand. She dropped the knife. She crawled to Kai's body. The Hatali was wrong. This was not a desecration. This was a trade. It was the only coin she had. She laid the severed lock of her hair on his chest, directly over the bullet wound, covering it. "Take it," she whispered to the painted spirits on the wall, to the silent, watching gods of the mesa. "Take my past, take my pride, take all the life I would have lived. Take it, and give me his—" She bent low, pressing her forehead to his still chest, her hand holding her offering in place. "Breathe," she commanded, her voice breaking. "Kai, breathe. I am here. Breathe." A single, shuddering, agonizing gasp tore through his body. Old Woman Sing's head snapped up. The Hatali stared, his eyes wide. Kai's body arched, a spasm of life, as air flooded his lungs. "Sing!" the old woman screamed to the medicine man, her voice cracking with a new, wild hope. "Sing the life way, he is fighting, sing!" Hosteen Kla began to chant, his voice no longer pleading, but booming. A song of battle, a song of pulling, a war cry to the spirits. Kai was not in the cave. He was in the dark, a cold, empty place. He was walking, and he was so very tired. He had been running for years, and now the run was over. He could rest. He heard his mother's voice, calling him from far away. He heard his grandfather. It was time to go home. Then he heard another voice, a different one. It was not Navajo. It was fierce, and it was angry. "Breathe, damn you, breathe!" A figure stood in his path. It was tall, made of the wind, and it wore the old turquoise of his ancestors. It was the Wind Son, the guardian of the mesas. "She calls you back," the spirit said. Its voice, the sound of the wind over sandstone. "I am finished," Kai whispered, his spirit form transparent. "No," the spirit said. "You have fought the monster. You have spilled his blood, but the prophecy is not finished. You must love what you hate. It is the only way to heal the land. She has paid the price." The spirit held out its hand. In its palm was a lock of tangled, muddy hair. "She has traded her past for your future. It is a holy bond. You cannot refuse it." Kai looked at the hair, and he felt her. He felt her hand on his chest. He felt her desperate, stubborn will, a fire in the cold darkness. It was the fire that had warmed him in the rainy cave. "She is Belagana," he whispered. "She is your heart," the spirit replied. The spirit turned. "Come, live. The Hata'ali sings for you. And she waits." Kai looked at his own hand. A woman's hand was in his, small, calloused, her fingers laced with his. He turned away from the darkness and walked toward the song. In the cave, a great, tearing sound came from outside. The wind rose, a sudden, violent sandstorm that shrieked across the mesa, a physical manifestation of the battle for his soul. It howled at the mouth of the cave, sending dust and grit swirling around the fire. Evelyn did not move. She held him, her body shielding his, her face buried in his neck. "Breathe," she whispered, over and over. "Breathe." His body was shaking, caught in a terrible tremor. "He is here." The Hata'ali cried. "The spirit returns." Kai's eyes flew open. They were wild, unfocused, seeing the world of shadows he had just left. Then they focused. They found her. He saw her. Her face, inches from his, streaked with tears and dirt. He saw her hair, hacked and ruined, a crown of sacrifice. He was alive. The pain was a galaxy, but he was alive. He lifted his good hand, his arm shaking with a terrible weakness. He did not touch his wound. He did not touch his grandmother. He touched her face. His thumb, rough and calloused, wiped a tear from her cheek. "Eve," he breathed. The word was pure agony, pure life. He looked at her ruined hair. His eyes filled with a dawning, profound understanding of what she had done. "Sha'adi," he whispered. "My sunlight." At that exact moment, as if a hand had been laid upon the world, the wind stopped. The sandstorm ceased. A complete, profound silence fell over the blood mesa. In the new, clean quiet, the only sound was the unsteady, precious, painful sound of Kainez breathing. Eve collapsed, laying her head on his chest, her strength gone. She wept, not in sorrow, but in a release so total it left her empty. Old woman Singh stood. She walked to the two of them, huddled by the fire. The Hata'ali watched, his face slick with sweat. The old woman reached out a trembling hand. She did not touch Kai. She laid her hand on Evelyn's head, on the ragged chopped hair. "The Hata'ali says our medicine is of pollen and earth," she said, her voice thick with wonder. He was wrong. Medicine is of the heart. It is the willingness to sacrifice. She looked at her grandson, who was holding the white woman's hand as if he were a drowning man. You came to us as a Belagana, she said to Evelyn. A wasp, an enemy. You leave, as Dine, a daughter of the wind's son. You have brought Hozo. You have brought balance. Kai closed his eyes, his grip tightening on Evelyn's hand. He was home. The silence on the mesa top was profound. It was a silence made of shock and blood and the sudden absence of gunfire. The surviving soldiers, leaderless and broken, looked at the handful of Navajo warriors who stood, panting, over the bodies of their fallen. They looked at the dead general, his face in the sacred red dirt, and they looked at Evelyn, who was now a heap on the ground, clinging to Kai, her body shaking with the aftershock of what she had done. Kai was breathing. Each breath was a shallow, ragged, painful victory. Old woman Sings took command. Her voice, though trembling, was iron. "Take their rifles," she ordered the warriors. "Bind the soldiers. The fight is over. The monster is dead." Evelyn did not move. She stayed by Kai, her hand on his chest, feeling the weak but steady beat of his heart. She had cut her hair. She had taken a life. The woman she had been, the daughter of Arthur Hartley, was as dead as General Dorn. In her place was this new creature, bloody and fierce, her identity forged in the fire of the last hour. They were moved. Kai was carried by the warriors, with the reverence of a fallen god, back to the sacred cave. Evelyn was helped by the Navajo women. They no longer looked at her with hatred. They looked at her with a strange, profound awe. They called her Azah Nadihi, the changing woman, the one who had sacrificed herself and been reborn. For 10 days, the mesa was a world balanced between life and death. Kai lay in the cave, lost in the Shadowlands. The bullet from Dorn's gun was lodged deep in his chest, too deep for the Hatali to remove with his knife. Hosteen Klaas sang until his voice was raw. He used the smoke of cedar and sage. Old woman Sings sat at her grandson's head, her hands never still, pressing cooling poultices of juniper and pinon resin to his burning skin. Evelyn sat at his feet. She was his anchor. She did not sleep. She did not leave. Her ankle was a swollen, purple mass, but she did not feel it. She cleaned his wounds. She spooned water between his cracked lips. She spoke to him, her voice low and constant. "You cannot leave," she whispered into the smoky darkness of the cave. "You are not allowed. I did not do this just to lose you. Do you hear me? Kai, I am waiting. You will come back." On the 3rd day, a new patrol of soldiers arrived at the base of the mesa. They were not Dorn's men. They were a larger detachment from Fort Wingate, led by a gray-haired man named Major Harrison. He had been sent to investigate why General Dorn, a territorial commander, had gone rogue, taking his men on an unauthorized Indian hunt based on a falsified warrant. They found a camp of disarmed, shame-faced soldiers and a dead general. Major Harrison, a man who had fought in the Great War and had no stomach for this kind of butchery, came up the mesa under a flag of truce. He found the Navajo, their dead laid out for burial, and he found Evelyn Hartley. She was not the girl he had been sent to find. She was sitting in the mouth of the sacred cave, her father's Colt revolver on her lap. Her hair was hacked short. Her face was streaked with Kai's blood and her own tears, and her eyes were as old as the mountains. She wore a borrowed buckskin dress. "Miss Hartley?" he asked, his voice gentle. "Evelyn Hartley." "I am," she said, her voice a rasp. "My God, child, we were told you had been kidnapped, that a renegade—" "I was not kidnapped," Evelyn said, her voice clear and cold, cutting through the morning air. "I was running from him." She gestured with her chin to the canyon floor, where Dorn's body lay wrapped in a blanket. She told him everything. She left nothing out: the arranged marriage, the aquifer, the flight from Dry Bluff, the way Dorn had hunted them, the lies he had told. She told him of the murder of the men in the alley, and of Kai's search for his sister. She told him of the capture and of the torture. She showed him Kai's back, the old scars from the whip, and she showed him the fresh, terrible, blackened ruin of the cauterized wound. "He did that," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. General Dorn, he did that to a wounded, bound man. And he would have done worse. He murdered those men in the canyon as much as I did. I stopped his hand. Major Harrison was a silent man for a long time. He looked at the dead general. He looked at the tortured, dying man in the cave. He looked at the handful of surviving soldiers from Dorn's command. "Sergeant," he said to one of his own men, "take their testimony. All of them." Freed from Dorn's shadow, the soldiers talked. They spoke of the general's obsession, his rage, his orders to shoot the Indian on sight, his promise of money for Kai's head. The war was over. There was no prosecution. There was a quiet, thorough military inquiry. General Samuel Dorn was recorded as having died in the line of duty, killed by renegades, but his warrants were voided. His name was disgraced. The story of his madness and his obsession was whispered from fort to fort. A dark, cautionary tale. Major Harrison stood before Evelyn on the 10th day. Kai's fever had finally broken. He was awake. He was weak, his breathing a shallow rasp, but his eyes were clear. He was sitting, propped against the cave wall, his hand in Evelyn's. "Miss Hartley," the major said, "your father has been notified. The ranch is yours. I can provide you with an escort. You can go home." Evelyn looked at the man who offered her the world she had known. The big house, the fine horses, the privilege of her name. She looked down at Kai. His fingers were laced with hers. He was watching her, his face taut, waiting for her choice. He would not ask her to stay. His pride would not allow it. She turned back to the major. "Major, I am grateful, but I am not Miss Hartley. Not anymore. Please, send a message to my father. Tell him the land is his. The horses are his. I wish him a long life, but I am not coming home." "Child," the major said, his voice soft, "you do not know what you are doing. This is a hard life. These are not your people." "You are wrong," Evelyn said, her voice clear. "They are my people. I fought for them. They fought for me. And this—" She squeezed Kai's hand. "This is my home." The major saw the look on her face. He saw the set of her jaw, the iron in her gaze. He had seen that look before, in men who had made a final, unbreakable choice. He nodded. "Very well," he said. He turned to Old Woman Sings. "This land," he said, gesturing to the Blood Mesa. "It is outside the reservation boundaries. It is not on any of our maps. By rights, it belongs to no one." "It belongs to the dying," the old woman said, her voice proud. "It has always belonged to us." "And it will remain so." Harrison said, "I will see to it. My report will state that this area is uninhabitable, sacred, and of no use to the army. You will be left in peace." He looked at Evelyn one last time, a deep sadness in his eyes. "Good luck, madam." He and his men departed. The sound of their horses faded, leaving the mesa in a profound, clean silence. Evelyn stood at the rim, watching them go. The sun was rising, a new, bright, clean sun. The air was washed by the storm. Old Woman Sing stood beside her. She watched the last of the bluecoats disappear. "He is gone," the old woman said. "The monster is gone, and the sun returns. You are Shahadi." "What does that mean?" Evelyn asked, her short, ragged hair blowing in the new wind. "It means morning light," the old woman said, a small, rare smile touching her lips. "You were our darkness, and then you were our dawn. You brought the light." Life returned, slowly, to the Blood Mesa. It was a new life, a scarred life. Kai healed. The bullet remained in his chest, a permanent, cold reminder. He would never draw a full breath again. His left shoulder was a knot of scarred, useless muscle. He could no longer draw a bow. He could not lift a rifle with two hands, but he was alive. Evelyn's ankle healed badly. Without a doctor's care, it set crookedly, leaving her with a permanent, noticeable limp. The rancher's daughter, who had once raced Apollo across the plains, now walked with the careful, deliberate grace of a wounded deer. They were a matched pair, broken but whole. In the spring, when the snows had melted from the high peaks and the stream ran fast and clean, Kai took her hand. He was strong enough to walk. He led her down from the caves, his good right arm strong, to the flat, open ground at the base of the mesa. It was the place where the battle had been fought, the place where Dorn had died. The ground was dark, enriched by the blood that had been spilled. He carried a leather pouch. "What is it?" she asked. He opened it. It was full of seeds, blue corn. "My grandfather kept these," he said. "He kept them hidden through all the years at Bosque Redondo. He said they were the seeds of the first people. He called them wind seeds, because the wind had brought them to us from the sacred mountains." He pressed a handful of the dry kernels into her palm. "This is where the new world begins," he said. "On the earth of the old one, we will plant—" He could not dig with the hata, the Navajo planting stick. His arm was too weak. So Evelyn took it. She, who had never labored in a field, drove the stick into the hard, red earth. Her limp was pronounced, her movements awkward, but she was strong. She made the hole. Kai knelt, using his good hand, and dropped 4 kernels into the earth, one for each of the sacred directions. They worked all day, side by side, the white woman with the scarred ankle, and the Navajo warrior with the ruined shoulder. They planted a field of corn on the graves of their enemies. It was a prayer. It was a promise. They did not live in the caves. They did not live in the old hogans. They began to build a house. They built it themselves. They built it in the way of the old ones, the Anasazi, the ancestors. They cut blocks of the red sandstone from the cliff. They mixed mud and straw for the mortar. Evil. "It is not a Hartley mansion," she said, her hands caked with the red mud, as she looked at the low, rising walls. "It is not a hogan," he replied, lifting a stone with his good arm. "What is it?" "It is Kie," he said. "It is ours, a place to belong. They finished it by the first snow. It was a small, strong house, its walls the color of the earth, its door facing the east, to greet the morning light. It was a hybrid, like them. Part white ranch house, part Navajo dwelling. It was the first and only house of its kind. That winter, they sat by their own fire, in their own home. Outside, the wind howled, but inside, there was peace. They had created a new world, a small, defiant sanctuary, on the land that had been paid for in blood. The years passed, not like a river, but like the slow, deliberate work of the wind on sandstone. The world outside the Blood Mesa changed. The territories of Arizona and Utah became states. The silver boom came and went. Railroads, thin lines of iron, scarred the plains, but on the mesa, protected by Major Harrison's old report and the land's own fierce, inaccessible nature, life found its rhythm. The camp of Morning Light grew. The cornfield, planted in blood, yielded a miraculous harvest. The Dene who had scattered to the high peaks slowly returned, drawn by the whispers of a free place, a place ruled not by soldiers, but by a warrior with a shattered shoulder and his white wife, the one they called Shadi. Evelyn's hair grew back, but she kept it cut to her shoulders, a practical length. The ragged, hacked strands from the sacred cave were kept by old woman Sings, wrapped in buckskin, a holy relic of the day the world was saved. Evelyn's limp was permanent, a part of her, a daily reminder of the flood and the fight. She learned the Dine tongue until it was as natural as her own, her accent a strange, lovely hybrid, like the house she had built. Kai never fully recovered his strength. The bullet in his chest was a cold companion, a thing that ached when the winter winds blew. He could no longer hunt or fight as a warrior did, but his spirit, the one he had brought back from the Shadowland, was immense. He became a leader, a Nat Ani, a headman, known not for his strength, but for his wisdom. He was a man of 2 worlds, and he understood both. He taught his people how to trade with the white settlers in the new towns, but also how to hold fast to the sacred mountains. He had found his sister. 2 years after the battle, he had ridden, with Evelyn, to the fort, not as a fugitive, but as a leader. He had found Ilara. She was not a laundress. She had been taken by a soldier, a kind man, who had married her and given her a new life. The reunion was tearful, a healing of the oldest wound in his heart. Evelyn and Kai had a child, a son. He was born in the red stone house during a gentle spring rain. He was not born with the help of a white doctor, but with old woman Sings and the Navajo women, who sang the blessing songs as Evelyn labored. He was a beautiful boy, a perfect fusion. He had his father's black hair and high, proud cheekbones, but he had his mother's eyes, the clear, startling blue of an Arizona sky. They named him Ta'alai, which meant one heart, one people, one new beginning. 7 years passed. Evelyn sat on the ground, her back against the trunk of a tree. It was a sturdy, young maple, its leaves a vibrant green. It grew in a strange place, on the flat, open mesa top, far from the stream. It grew from the very spot where General Samuel Dorn had fallen, where his blood had soaked the earth. The Dini called it the tree that never died, for it had sprung from a place of death, a stubborn, living testament to the land's power to heal itself. Her son, Ta'alai, who was now a lean, bright boy of 7, sat cross-legged in front of her, mending a rabbit snare. He was a quiet, thoughtful child, already a skilled tracker. "Mother," he asked, his English perfect. "Old woman Sings told me again about the battle. She said you killed the soldier, the one called Dorn." Evelyn stopped her work. She was grinding dried corn on a medity, her hands strong and calloused, her movements rhythmic. She looked at her son. His blue eyes were serious, searching. "I did," she said, her voice quiet. "It is true." Was it hard? Evelyn looked at her hands. No longer the pale, soft hands of a rancher's daughter, but the hands of a dying woman. "It was the hardest thing I have ever done. But you were brave. Grandmother says you were like changing woman." Evelyn smiled, a small, sad smile. She brushed the blue cornmeal from her hands. "I was not brave, Ta'alai. I was afraid. I was terrified. But I was more afraid of losing your father than I was of that man's gun. He was a monster." He was. Evelyn agreed. But monsters are not what we should remember. It is the brave men we must hold on to. She looked at her son, at his beautiful, mixed face, the living proof of her impossible choice. "I want to tell you something," she said, pulling him closer, her arm around his small shoulders. "Your father, when he came for me, when he chose to fight for me, he was a marked man. His own people thought he was a traitor, and my people thought he was a savage. He had no one." She pointed to the great red canyon walls, glowing in the late afternoon sun. "This world, this land, it was full of rules. It was a forbidden world. A white woman could not love an Indian. A warrior could not trust a Belagana. Your father and I, we broke all the rules." She smoothed the boy's dark hair. "I want you to remember this. Your father did not claim me with victory. He did not win me in a battle, or buy me with horses. He claimed me with his heart. He had the courage to love me in a world that forbade it, and that is the only kind of courage that matters, the only kind that lasts." The boy was silent, leaning his head against her shoulder, taking in the weight of her words. A shadow fell over them. "You teach the boy lies. Shadi," a voice said. It was low and rough, and full of a quiet amusement. Evelyn looked up. Kai stood there. He had come from the cornfields, his walk the familiar, uneven gait that was the result of his wounds. He was no longer a young warrior. He was a man in his prime, but the years of pain and leadership had marked him. His black hair, once a warrior's banner, was streaked with silver at the temples, like snow on the high peaks. He was lean, his face a map of the life he had lived. But his eyes were unchanged. They were the same dark, deep, unreadable eyes from the canyon. They were the eyes of the wind. He looked at her, and in his gaze, she was still the fierce, unbroken girl in the torn silk dress. "I teach him the truth," Evelyn replied, her hand reaching up to him. He took her hand, his good one, and pulled her to her feet. His grip was still strong, still warm. She stood, her limp pronounced, and leaned against him. They were a strange, broken, perfect pair. "I did not have courage," Kai said to his son, his voice gruff. "I had no choice. Your mother, she is a stubborn woman. She grabbed my heart and would not let it go, as I grabbed yours," she whispered, her hand on his chest, feeling the steady, labored beat of his heart. The bullet was still there, a part of him. A gentle wind began to blow, a soft, evening breeze that stirred the leaves of the maple tree. It came from the west, carrying the high, lonely scent of the desert, of sage and red dust. It whispered around the corners of their red stone house. Evelyn laid her head on his shoulder. She felt the wind on her face, and she felt the solid, warm earth beneath her feet. "It is a good wind," she murmured. "It sounds like peace." Kai put his good arm around her, holding her close. He looked at their son, who was watching them with a quiet, knowing smile. He looked at the cornfield, and at the red mesa, his sacred mountain, his home. He closed his eyes, listening to the wind. It was the same wind that had howled at the mouth of the cave, the same wind that had carried the ghosts of his ancestors. But it was different now. Evelyn felt his body relax against hers. She put her hand over his. "Tonight," she whispered, so low only he could hear. "The wind does not sound lonely. Tonight, it echoes with our names." He did not answer. He did not need to. He bent his head and pressed his lips to her hair, the short, practical hair he loved. They stood as the sun went down, 3 small figures against the vast, red land. The wind and the earth had found their ho-ho. They had found their balance. They had become one. Freedom, Evelyn knew, was not a place. It was not a piece of land or a territory marked on a map. Freedom was not a place we go. It was the person we choose to walk with. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are listening from, so please drop a comment below. Share your thoughts and let us all connect. If you enjoyed this tale, please subscribe to my channel, Wild West Tales, and give this video a like. And to help this story reach even more listeners, please consider supporting us by hitting that hype button. It helps more than you know.